Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge, the podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become better entrepreneurs and leaders. Now, let's get started. Welcome everyone to another episode of The Construction Leading Edge, the site and podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become more effective entrepreneurs and leaders. My name is Todd DeWalt and I will be your host today. Today we have with us on the podcast Debbie Burton. She is an account executive for USI Insurance Services. And USI Insurance Services is a privately held national and international broker that works across the United States and abroad as well. And they're one of the largest brokers in the country. And among other things, they provide insurance products and bonding products to contractors. Of course, they also service lots of other industries, but specifically for today's conversation, we're going to be talking about bonding, performance bonds, payment bonds, other types of bonds that contractors need or may need as they grow their business. So, Debbie, welcome to the podcast, and thanks so much for taking some time to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, let's just jump into it. I've got several questions to ask today, and we'll start off with this one. What are some of the most common types of bonds that contractors need? And tell us a little bit about why contractors need bonding.
First and foremost, for most contractors who bid in the public and federal government arena, the reason bonds are typically needed is to protect the public from contract defaults, from problems on getting projects completed that are paid for with taxpayer money. The most common types of bonds needed by contractors who bid in this arena are bid bonds, which is a document that basically states that if you are the selected bidder, you will enter into the contract per the terms and conditions of the contract based on your bid, and the performance and payment bonds, which we nickname the final bonds. The performance bond guarantees that you will perform the contract as the contract is written, and the payment bond guarantees that you will pay your labor, material, suppliers, etc., per your agreements with them based on the awarded contract amount. Occasionally, you'll see contractors needing additional bonds depending on the types of projects, location of projects. Some municipalities and states require license bonds of contractors, and there are situations where there may be a dispute with a subcontractor as the contract is getting completed, and you may need things called release of lien bonds, or other type of instruments. When contracts really go south, you may need court bonds if the thing ends up in court. So, but the most commonly used bonds are the bid, performance, and payment bonds.
Gotcha. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a bond and an insurance policy?
Definitely. A bond, and most insurance companies, a lot of insurance companies write bonds, so people misunderstand the concept. Actually, a bond is more like going to the bank and getting a loan, except we don't give you money, we give you a guarantee. The bond is a three-party agreement. The contractor is known as the principal on the bond. The obligee is known as the owner or the GC in case of subcontracts, who the bond is payable to. And the third party to the agreement is called the surety. And what they do is through a process of analysis of financials, backgrounds, projects in the past, a very comprehensive analysis, they guarantee that the contractor is financially able to do and undertake these projects. Whereas surety is a three-party agreement, insurance is a two-party agreement. Whereas insurance considers loss provisions, surety does not. That's why the pre-qualification process in a lot of people's minds is a little overstated. But if there is a loss on a surety bond, if the contractor runs into problems to not complete that contract, the surety steps in and takes it from there by either giving money to the owner to relet the project or finding contractors to finish that project. And as such, all contractors are required to sign what is known as indemnity agreements. And these agreements guarantee to the surety that if the surety pays a loss on behalf of that contractor, the surety will be reimbursed.
So in the event that the surety has to step in and complete a project, what happens on the backside of that? What happens between the surety and the project owner? And then I guess what I'm really interested in would be what happens between the surety and the contractor.
Okay, the surety and the project owner will work together to come to some sort of resolution that will get the project done. First and foremost is, as previously stated, the majority of these contracts are publicly funded. They're funded with public funds. And so in order to protect the public, these projects need to get done. So the surety will work with the owner, and the contractor's not left out of this process. Sometimes sureties have been known to give the contractors loans if they've gotten into financial issues and are unable to pay suppliers, meet payroll, et cetera. Sureties will step in and work with the contractor to get them financially sound enough to complete the job. If the contractor just cannot complete the job, then the surety does step in with the owner's help and direction and will either find another contractor to complete that project, or they will pay whatever funding is left available to the owner so the owner can find a contractor to complete that project. The contractor is responsible for any and all losses that the surety pays on their behalf. It's a very intense claim process. The sureties handle those directly with the contractors. We don't get too involved other than we get, as a surety broker, other than the fact that if the contractor is not responding to the surety, then we try to facilitate them and let them know that it's vital that they respond. Bonds inherently have limitations on when and how responses need to be provided to the owner, to the surety, et cetera. There's time limits on this. So we try to be as extremely proactive as a broker as we can, and we work very hard to have good relationships with our contractors so that if they think something might happen, if they feel like they've maybe got a sub who is not fulfilling their part of the contract, we get in front of it as quick as we can. Our ultimate goal is to avoid any losses or have any type of claim issues on any project, on any contractors. But when they do happen, there are resources available that we help facilitate with the contractor, the owner, and the surety. So,
Gotcha. You mentioned that a lot of bonding is required for municipal or publicly funded projects, but do you also see privately funded projects for corporate clients requiring payment performance bonds as well?
Yes, we do. And that a lot of times will vary with several factors. Some corporate clients require all, private corporate clients require all of their projects to be bonded. Because if there's ever an issue, they have that guarantee of that third party, the surety. You see a lot of banks that perhaps they're doing the funding on a large project, and as part of them providing the funding to that private owner or private developer, they're going to require that the project be bonded. And sometimes we see on the private side, if you're a new contractor on their list, that perhaps they'll make you bond the first project or the first two projects, or they may have thresholds that if your project that you're doing for XYZ restaurant chain is, over this amount, they always require bond, or they may require you to bond the first one or two, just till they get a feel for you and how you perform on their contract.
Sure, makes perfect sense. Are there any alternative products out there that are more beneficial to private clients as opposed to a typical payment performance bond?
There may be. I'll be perfectly honest. I've been doing surety bonding for about 25 years. There have been products that have been out on the market. I am not very familiar with them, but I know that there is a product called SubGuard Insurance. It's some sort of insurance type project or product that is available in some cases. I'm sure that, anyone could go to the web and pick up the information on there. Some owners require more of a cash type product than a bond. So they may, require letters of credit, like a percentage of the amount of the total project in a more liquid type of instrument than a performance and payment bond.
I see. And for folks who are completely new to payment and performance bonds, what's a ballpark percentage cost for bonding your project? What needs to be figured in on the front end when they estimate projects?
To be perfectly honest, anytime anyone approaches a broker and they've never been in the bond arena before, that's always one of the first questions they ask. However, there are so many factors that go into it. The type of work you do, less hazardous work has a different rate structure than standard general building work. Electrical is more hazardous than landscaping. So it's really hard to narrow down. But, if you've got very strong, financially well-heeled, well-experienced contractors, more on the general contractor side, or some of the more robust trades like mechanical, electrical, etc., you could see rates, to be perfectly honest, as low as $5 per thousand. There are programs out there where you don't have to do a lot of the underwriting. There's limits on those programs as to the size of projects you can undertake and the number of projects that can be underway at one time, and that rate is $30 per thousand, no matter what trade you're in. But the reason being is you don't have to go through the whole underwriting process. And like I said, their availability and the size and type of bonds you can pursue is extremely limited. There's bonding available through the SBA. We've seen the actual bond rate as low as 1.5%, but then you have to add the SBA fee on top of that. So it really runs the gamut. The surety associations have a basic rate manual, and for most GCs, you're looking at a sliding scale starting around 2.5% on general building trades. For the less hazardous, the slide starts at 1.5%, and for the least hazardous trades, it's 1%. So, but it all varies based on your underwriting, your financial strength, your ability to do the job, your experience in that type of work, et cetera. So it's really hard to pinpoint any type of a ballpark estimate simply because it varies across the board.
So really, the answer is the lawyer answer, which is it depends, right?
Yes, exactly.
Depends on lots of factors. What are some of the most common misconceptions that contractors have about bonding?
One of the ones that we see is you write my insurance, therefore you can give me a bond. That's the most common one, simply because bonding surety departments are typically within insurance services. That they think that if we have your insurance, that automatically qualifies you for bonding. But, as previously stated, there's a great deal of underwriting and analysis that has to be done in order to qualify a contractor for bonding. And that is financial analysis of the company, the corporation, any subsidiary companies, a credit report on the owners. That's a critical piece. Questionnaires that are very specific to their contracting specialty, that, takes into account, their largest jobs, their banking relationship, if they own or lease their equipment, their suppliers, their subs. It's a very extensive underwriting process. And don't get me wrong, once we've gathered the information, we can typically have a response within about 48 hours. But when most contractors see the list of underwriting information we need, it's a kind of a rude awakening. Like I said, it's like going to the bank and getting a loan. You just wouldn't walk in and say, hey, I have a checking account, I want to buy a Lexus, give me $40,000, and not expect them to do some underwriting. So,
understood. So just because you have insurance, just because you're insurable doesn't mean you're bondable. It's a pretty lengthy process. What are some other misconceptions that you've seen contractors have?
Well, and just back to what you said, anyone is bondable. I have never seen anyone that wasn't bondable. You may not like the terms and conditions due to the underwriting factors, but there are very few instances where some sort of program cannot be put together. It's the other misconception is well, we don't really need this bond, or they try to. Our contractors will try to figure out ways to get around the bonding, but it's a cost of doing business, and like I said, it's primarily to protect public monies. So,
sure. You touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the basic requirements for getting bonded, and really what are underwriters looking for?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, and the number one is financial information. Sureties need personal financials on the owners. They need, of course, corporate financials on the construction company, as well as any subsidiaries. And the reason for that is a lot of times you'll see the financials mixed. If you're renting your building from your owner, then that owner's financials are important, because if something happens to that owner and it's not properly structured, and you may not have a building to come back to where your company is housed. So financials are first and foremost. And like I said previously, depending on the size, type, and extent of the bonding program you want, that can be easy or hard. The other thing we need to know is, of course, background on the owners, the key personnel, the size and type of jobs you want to pursue, the geographical area. That's important, because sureties want to make sure that you're in your expertise, you're in your comfort zone. Not to say they don't consider you wanting to go to another state, but sometimes the sureties will call on their counterparts in other states to see, what the requirements are. Some states are easier to work in than others. You wouldn't want to go to New York with the same type of bid information that you would look at a job in Kentucky for, because in New York you have to deal with unions, et cetera. So you need to be able, the surety is a good resource of getting you some of that information. But the financials, personal and corporate, company information, your banking information is also key. If you have a bank line of credit, if you don't have one, could you get one if you wanted to stretch your program? just to make sure that you can fund, the upfront cost, et cetera, on a project, the startup costs. And of course, make sure you have proper insurance in place.
Sure. Can you give us 2 or 3 red flags that are common when an underwriter is looking at an application that cause problems?
Sure. If you have investments, real estate, if you put a lot of stuff in your construction company financials that really don't belong there, like shopping centers or farms or things like that, then that kind of raises a red flag if you have a lot of real estate type things in there, simply because then that triggers a lot more analysis. Okay, is this shopping center profitable? What are the cash flows? Are you taking money from the construction company to keep that afloat? The big thing for surety bonding is liquidity. Your current assets, which in surety terms are your cash, your accounts receivable that are 90 days and less past due. Any receivables over 90 days are discounted, unless you can give a good explanation of why it's not collectible after 90 days. Of course, investments that you have, money markets, et cetera, are all liquid assets. A CPA will put things like prepaids and deposits and stuff like that is a current asset. That doesn't really work because you've already paid that, and that deposit's already there, so they're not current assets. The surety could not rely on those in the case of an issue that they needed to make sure you had the liquidity. The other thing is profitability. For tax purposes, a lot of owners, contractors like to take all the money out of their company at year end. Surety wants to be able to, the surety wants you to let your company grow. They're not saying leave every penny in there because we understand tax law and tax ramifications, but you need to be able to keep your balance sheet growing, especially if you want to continually increase your program, increase your job size, et cetera. Those are the 2 biggest issues, are liquidity and keeping money in the company. Of course, make sure your debt structure is reasonable. Don't go buy a new road maintainer every time CAT puts one out, and just keep a good, clean balance sheet. So.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the real estate. Because what I've seen, a lot of small construction business owners especially have, I guess you could call commingled financials, where they own property, they own equipment, and it's all under one umbrella. If someone has a piece of rental property or a farm or something like that that's not really related to the construction business, but they own it, how should that be handled? Should that be set up under a different holding company? Should it be in their individual name? How should that work?
It just depends. I mean, the sureties will look at that. They will analyze it. I mean, if they can tell, if it's pretty apparent that it's just there because you have one CPA, you want to do one statement a year, and you want it all under one umbrella. I mean, I've seen it there where it remains there. We just the surety just gets an explanation of it. They, they just want to understand why it's there. I mean, we've seen where we have the wife's nail salon on the construction company balance sheet as a piece of real estate and associated debt. So they, it's not so much that they expect you to split it out, but they just need to understand it.
Okay.
And there are times where they may say, if it doesn't hurt you tax-wise, you might want to try to, and then sometimes what we do is we get kind of a separate statement just on the construction company if it's really convoluted. So.
Okay, so I see. So it's not necessarily a red flag to have commingled assets and financials. Just be prepared to explain why.
Exactly.
Is that right? Okay,
exactly.
Perfect.
And most likely, if you have a small rental company, you've got a couple of rental houses, and you've got it as an LLC or something like that, that entity is going to also have to indemnify the surety company, because you now have an avenue to take funds from your construction company and put it elsewhere. So 9 times out of 10, these related entities and related businesses, whatever, are required to also indemnify the surety company.
I see. Well, that leads me to the next question. What are some common mistakes that contractors make when it comes to not necessarily, I think we've covered the bond application process, but let's talk about after they've applied, they've secured their bonding. What are some common mistakes that you see contractors make with their either not responding to bond claims, not preparing themselves to defend against bond claims, anything after the point where they've received their bond? Does that make sense?
Yeah. The biggest key, and of course any business relationship, is communication. Understanding that, if a contractor comes in and the largest job they've ever done in their entire career, their entire being, is $1.5 million, and I'm just going to use round figures, and they come in and they want to bid an $8 million job, we're going to have questions.
Sure.
Why does it make sense? And like I said, communication is the key. If you feel like you're getting upside down on a job, don't wait until you're upside down. Get in touch with your surety agent, your broker, because they have at their fingertips not only the surety company has resources that they will put you in touch with as to, helping you get through, some hiccups along the way. That they've got great resources, whether they be financial resources, legal resources, et cetera. But communication is key. If you have a good relationship with your broker and as well as your surety company, then it is vital, and it makes the whole process run much, much smoother. But just making sure that when your broker asks for information, there's a reason. It's not just to irritate you. We need to keep the files current. Number one, you keep your files current. Then when you ask for something, it gets done. But if your financials aren't ready, then usually the typical time frame is 120 days past year end. If we're 180 days out and we still don't have that year end financial, we're going to wonder, okay, is there a reason? Has something happened you don't want us to see? And that leads to, a lot of heartache and issues. Whereas, it could just be, hey, my CPA had a baby and she just got back to work. Quick, easy explanation, and it puts everyone at ease.
Sure.
But like I said, communication is key, and just understanding that when we ask for information, it's vital. It's realistic. When you have a $75 million bond program, we're going to want to see more than a statement at year end. We're going to need to see, maybe quarterly financials and work in process, et cetera. Especially coming out of this recession, we have had contractors who failed and tried to keep it secret as long as they could.
Right.
But that's just really, and then all of a sudden we just start getting claim letter after claim letter, and we're not getting returned phone calls. So communication is key.
Sure. So here's a misconception that probably I have, and I would say other people have, is that the perception is that the surety is like the man. They're the bank, they're the bill collector, that they're just there to get their money. But the reality is, what I'm hearing you say is they are a resource for help, and we should contact them at the earliest sign of an issue, because the surety, it's in their best interest to solve a problem before it gets to the point where it can't be solved. So what I'm hearing you say is communicate early, often. If there are issues, let your broker know, get in touch with the surety, and then leverage the resources and the information that those folks have because they're on your team. The broker and the
Exactly.
surety, they both want the contractor to succeed. So we're all, what I'm hearing is we're all in this together. We want to succeed and avoid claims, and the best way to do that is communicate, like you said. So that's great advice, and I think that addresses probably a common misconception right there. So
Right.
let's say something's happened and a client makes a claim on the performance bond. And that's the way it happens, correct? The
Yes.
client actually files a claim on or against the bond. It doesn't necessarily come to the contractor. The contractor never makes a claim on the bond because, as you stated earlier, the surety protects the project owner. So
Yeah.
let's say I'm the contractor. I just got a letter in the mail. I got copied on a claim against my performance bond that went to the surety. What's going to happen next?
What happens next is, number one, the surety has been advised that there's a possible claim going to be filed. The surety is going to almost, to be honest, the day they get that letter, you're getting advised. You, the contractor, are getting a letter from the surety that states, we have received notice of a possible situation by such and such subcontractor on this project in the amount of this, and they will give you, the contractor, a copy of whatever documentation they received. And then the surety will then advise, we will be in touch with you by such and such a date, or if you have any information regarding this, please contact us. The surety allows you to use your own attorneys in most cases, and they'll ask for your attorney's name and number and information. So, again, communicate. The surety, number one misconception is, the surety will just pay my claim and I'm done. That's not exactly the way it happens, because people tend to forget that you've indemnified the surety. And the surety is not just going to hand over money to some subcontractor who says you haven't paid them. There may be a very valid, and to be honest, probably 85% of the time, there's a valid reason you didn't pay them, because you removed them from the job. And they may go along and, file a claim for their whole contract amount under the payment bond when you terminated them when they were only 25% done because they were non-performing. So the surety is going to be in contact with you to get, quote unquote, your side of the story, and understand that the surety is your partner in this. And so, they're not just going to turn around and write out a check. They're going to talk to you about ways to mitigate it. Okay, can you guys come to some kind of agreement prior to this going to a formal claim situation? But again, it's communicate, and respond.
Gotcha. Okay. Can you tell us about, and if you can, I understand, but can you tell us about a situation, maybe, I guess I would call it a nightmare story about a bond that went wrong, and maybe some, let's call it a case study on a situation or project that went bad, and what can we learn from that? Do you have anything you could share with us along those lines?
I'll be honest, I've never had a contract bond going to claim.
Really?
However, I've had some that, where we have gotten a notice that, a sub was going to file a claim. I got that claim notice from the surety. The surety sent it to the contractor direct, but I also sent it to the contractor. And I said, can you please give me, can you please respond to this, tell me what? And, my contractor was able to send me a copy of the check that they had used to settle this whole matter. I immediately flipped that to the surety company and say, hey, this has been resolved. Please see this. Please see the release of lien from the subcontractor that this has been resolved. And this all was done in 48 hours.
Wow. What are some common?
It. But there are the horror stories out there where contractors have taken on jobs that, to be honest, they probably shouldn't have been they probably shouldn't have taken to begin with, or they took it at such narrow margins that there was no way they could do it. So, you just have to, those stories are around. There are some good resources if contractors want to read some of these stories and understand why sureties are the way they are. And, I'll be happy to send you those links so you can put them in your resources. The NASBP, which is the National Association of Surety Bond Producers, are a wonderful resource, and they put out a newsletter every week about how sureties have stepped in and how contractors, have been helped by, the surety stepping in and helping them through these types of situations. There's been a lot of failures for contractors. When you hear a contractor say, yeah, I was just low on $12 million worth of work, unfortunately, it's going to cost me $15 million to do it, you start to worry.
Yeah, that math just doesn't work out.
No.
You mentioned resources. That's a perfect segue. My next question is, what are some of those resources? And you mentioned the NASBP, and then you had mentioned a website before we started the interview. Was that suretylearn.org? Is that correct?
Yes. It's www.suretylearn.org. It is a website or a web address sponsored by the NASBP, but it has wonderful resources on why you need a construction-oriented CPA, on what to look for in a banking relationship, what to look for in a surety bond producer, and some resources there on SBA, how to get pre-qualified, why we need what we need. I looked at the site earlier today, and it has a wonderful amount of information. I would also suggest perhaps trying, a lot depends on the size of the contractor, but AGC, the Association of General Contractors, they have a website. I'm not sure if they're .com or .org, but they can easily be found on the web. They have resources there, and also the SBA, the Small Business Administration. So.
See, I did not know that the SBA had any sort of bonding program. That's good to know.
Yeah, it is, and actually they are a wonderful resource. They have changed a lot over the last few years. They're great for small and emerging contractors because they analyze the financials a little differently to give them as much surety credit as you can get. There's a pool of surety companies throughout the U.S. that work with the SBA, and so if you, like, say, I expect I have a handful of accounts that are SBA accounts, and they don't just do little stuff. I've got one contractor that we just issued a $3.2 million bond via the SBA. The reason being is they had never bonded before. So their financials weren't quite of the contractor quality, but what they were doing was perfect for them. We couldn't get a standard market to bond them at this stage of where they needed to be for this type of size of a job, considering they'd never had bonding before. But we got it through the SBA. They got the job, they finished the job, made a wonderful amount of profit. And we went through a normal surety company, so everything on the paperwork looks normal. But what the SBA does is they work with these surety companies, and they guarantee, the SBA guarantees to the surety company like up to 90% of that contract. So the surety company will go ahead and underwrite it, but their real exposure is usually somewhere between 10 and 20%, because the SBA is going to guarantee it. Now, there's a fee involved with that. There always is an SBA fee on top of your bond premium. So it can get a little pricey, but if you're just starting out, there's so many different types of small programs. But if you're starting out and, there's maybe some little glitches or something that keeps you prohibits you from participating in the standard market right away. The SBA is a great place to go. It's amazing. It's pretty much all online now, and then they respond very quickly. So
Interesting. That's a great resource.
yeah.
Fantastic. I have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. One standard question that I ask everyone on the podcast is, what is one book, whether it's on leadership, business, professional development, personal growth, any book that you think would be helpful that you would recommend everyone that listens to this read?
I really don't have one. I mean, I have one that's called Surety for Dummies that I actually have found to be quite beneficial. But I really can't pinpoint one. So
Okay, we'll
I'll
go
be
with
honest.
Surety for Dummies. That sounds,
Yeah.
based on my experience with a lot of contractors, that's very appropriate. So myself included, probably. Well, let's do this. Tell us a little bit about your business and give us a plug for your business and what sort of services your company can provide to contractors. And then how can the folks that listen to this get in touch with you if they want to find out more?
Sure. Well, I have been in Surety for 25 years. I have written everything from the small startup, got your first bond type contractor to contractors who actually work internationally as well as nationally with offices in 8 to 12 states. It's a thrilling business. I mean, I enjoy what I do. I wouldn't have been doing it for 25 years. Finding a way to get it done is great. I work for USI Insurance Services, as Todd mentioned at the beginning of this. They are the third or fourth largest broker in the U.S. It's a privately held company, and they have operations throughout the U.S. as well as international capabilities. I am based in the Louisville, Kentucky office. However, I physically live in Denver, Colorado. So technology is great. But you can get a hold of me by email is usually the best way. And that's Deborah, DEBORAH, .Burton, BURTON, at USI.biz, BIZ. And my office phone number is area code 502-216-9822. Like I said, I love what I do. I've been doing it for a long time. And I have taken contractors who have started out with bond programs of, say, a $500,000 single job to $1 million aggregate program to where they're now doing projects, single projects of 10 to 12 million with aggregate programs of 20 to 25 million. I've handled contractors whose aggregate programs have exceeded $100 million. So, and I've got some guys who just do the little $250,000 jobs one at a time. So it's a great business. It's fun to do. USI offers all kinds of insurance products as well that contractors need. We have in Kentucky a dedicated construction unit. That's all they do is contractors. I'd be happy to put you in touch with any of those people if you want to look into some of the insurance, the work comp that's needed, builder's risk, owner's railroad protective, whatever you need.
Great. So if someone is in a different geographical area, they can email you, call you about bonding, insurance, any sort of product that USI Insurance Services may provide, and you can put them in touch with the right person, right?
I can, to be perfectly honest. I handle contractors coast to coast.
Ah, okay. Well, fantastic. So they may have the
but-
opportunity to work with you then. Great.
Yeah. I've got contractors right now who are in Florida, Virginia, Kentucky, of course, as well as I've got some contractors in California and Oregon. So because of technology, you don't really have to geographically be in the same place anymore, and stuff. But definitely, if you have a need that's very geographically specific, we'll get you in touch with the right people.
Okay, and I can vouch for Debbie. I've been working with Debbie for the last 2 or 3 years, and the only thing I can say is sometimes it may take Debbie up to 2 minutes to respond to an email. So if your response time needs to be less than 2 minutes, she may not be right for you. But if you can live with inside of 2 minute response time to get a bid bond out or to get a response to an email, then she's probably going to take good care of you. So I can definitely recommend Debbie. Debbie, you've taken great care of us for the last several years, so I would highly recommend you to anybody else for sure.
Thank you.
Well, is there anything else that you feel like we need to know about bonding before we wrap up here?
Just know that it's not there to irritate you. There is a rhyme and a reason. It's to protect. Like I said, the majority of it is to protect the public interest, the taxpayers' money, and for the private owners, it's to protect them as well. If you're a GC, if you use subs, we highly recommend you bond your subs. Some sureties require it over certain levels, but the reason being is that gives another layer. If you've got a sub that goes south, and there's been many instances where subs have been unable to finish their work, if you have a bond from them, then you have that surety protection for yourself as well. But all in all, the largest and most important factor is communication. And whether you have an existing relationship or whether you're looking at getting into projects that require bonding for the first time, just know that communication is key. It helps us know you. It helps you know us. And once we all get to know each other, it's a great working relationship.
That's I'm just writing down some key takeaways here, and what I'm hearing is communication is key. Bonding is available. You don't have to be at a certain size or a certain situation. Bonding is available regardless of your situation. You may just have to pay more for it, correct?
Correct.
And you need to get your financials in order. There are some things you need to do to position yourself to get the best rate on your bonding program. And then the last thing is the broker and the surety are your partners, and you need to work together with them, leverage their resources and knowledge, because if there is an issue, they've seen a lot more than you have probably as a contractor. So communicate with them early and often, get them involved, and don't look at them as the enemy, but look at them as a partner.
Correct. That's key.
Fantastic. Great stuff, Debbie. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. And I'll have this information, these links, your contact information in the show notes on the website. And again, thanks so much for doing this, and have a great day.
You too, and thanks for the opportunity.